There was a time where the price of Bitcoin was hovering around $10. A few years later, when Bitcoin hit $100, many people sold their Bitcoin because they believed that the price would never be able to go up forever. Fast forward to today, the price of Bitcoin is worth tens of thousands. Some expect that in this bull market cycle, it could be worth hundreds of thousands. If you look at Plan B, which is a very well-known figure in the crypto space, he's known for making the stock-to-flow model, which has been the primary model that people in the crypto space look at to get an estimate of where the price of Bitcoin could go. He actually believes that the price of Bitcoin could go up to $800,000 per Bitcoin in this bull market cycle. And then we have
Michael Saylor.
Michael Saylor.
Michael Saylor.
Michael Saylor.
Michael Saylor.
Bitcoin is succeeding faster than any monetary economic idea in the history of the world.
who is the CEO of MicroStrategy, a publicly traded company which is known for implementing a Bitcoin strategy for their treasury, meaning that they have been buying up Bitcoin to protect themselves against inflation because they had so much money in their bank account, and rather than having it sit there and lose purchasing power due to inflation, they decided to start buying Bitcoin. And they were the main use case of a company, or the main example of a company that is going quite all in on Bitcoin. Recently, Michael Saylor held a talk at Bitcoin 2024, which is a big industry event. And during that talk, he shared his vision that one Bitcoin could be worth around $15 million per Bitcoin in the next 21 years. Most people find it really hard to understand how it is possible that the price of Bitcoin could go so high. But similarly, 10 years ago, people would also not be able to comprehend what the price of Bitcoin would be today. So in this video, we are going to dive into one of the most important questions, which is, can Bitcoin go up forever? But before we dive into it, I need to give the usual disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing in this video is financial advice. It has been made for educational purposes only. And before doing any investment, you should always do your own research and or consult with a professional financial advisor. If you want to see more videos like this, where I break down important topics in the crypto space and help you to get an advantage as a crypto investor, make sure to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. I'm going to give you my opinion straight off the bat. I believe that the price of Bitcoin will go up forever. Why? Let me explain. It's because of greed. Greed is the root of the downfall of all empires. Let's take the Roman Empire as an example. They were once at the top in terms of military and economic power, but eventually their economy collapsed and the empire collapsed with it too. The reason for this is that they devalued their currency. They started to mix gold and silver with cheaper precious metals like copper to multiply their currency. The Romans did this to fund their military campaigns and their lavish lifestyles. But the consequence of all of this was that it devalued their currency, which led to hyperinflation and ultimately the collapse of their empire. Back in the days, people used to carry around gold coins, but as more value was created, it just simply wasn't practical anymore to carry around large bags of gold. First of all, it's unsafe, and second of all, it's just really heavy. So they created paper money which was backed by gold. And this system worked really well because the paper money was actually backed by something of real value. From 1776 to 1930, this system worked really well because there was practically no inflation. But in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created and they started to centralize money. The government started to become greedy and started to slowly move away from the gold standard so that they could print more money, and that's when inflation started to occur. In the 1970s, the US government completely moved away from the gold standard, and that is when inflation started to skyrocket because the dollar really wasn't backed anymore by any tangible asset. Inflation went up with almost 3,000% since the Federal Reserve was created. The US didn't collapse like the Roman Empire did, but they're facing some serious problems right now because the US dollar has seriously devalued. They're facing some big issues right now because they've printed a ton of money recently or in the past decades, and their national debt is also increasing at a very rapid pace. If you go on a website called the US Debt Clock, you can actually see a real-time dashboard of the US national debt. And it's quite shocking to see how in a period of just a few seconds or a few minutes, millions are being added to the national debt. And this high inflation is really devaluing the US dollar. And if you think that this is only happening with the dollar, well, you're wrong. Governments around the world are basically doing the same thing. They're printing money out of thin air. So if you're holding euros, Japanese yen, Great British pound, or any other currency, then probably you're experiencing inflation and devaluing of that currency in a very similar way that the US is also experiencing the devaluing of their dollar. And this instability reminds us of historical patterns that we've seen before, which is that governments will eventually debase their own currencies due to greed, and that their populations will start to lose trust in those same currencies. Well, enter Bitcoin. Unlike fiat, Bitcoin is a digital asset that has some very specific properties that make it really valuable. First of all, Bitcoin has a hard cap to its supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be in existence. Unlike fiat money, it's not possible to print more Bitcoin out of thin air. And because of this real scarcity of this hard cap in the supply of Bitcoin, many investors and organizations are now going heavily into Bitcoin, because in a world where money can be printed out of thin air, they're looking for an alternative to protect themselves against inflation. And that's why you see that large asset managers like BlackRock are heavily going into Bitcoin right now. Earlier this year, they even announced or released their own Bitcoin spot ETF, which became the fastest growing ETF in history. And this shows how much demand there is, even in the traditional markets, for Bitcoin and crypto related products. Now we also see that publicly traded companies are going into Bitcoin right now as a way to protect their treasuries against inflation. The best example is probably MicroStrategy, which has been buying up thousands of Bitcoin as a way to hedge themselves against the devaluing of their money in their bank account. And as more and more market participants enter the market and want to get their hands on this really scarce asset, we see that slowly but surely the price of Bitcoin is being driven up over the long term. And this is attracting even more investors and more people that want to get their hands on some Bitcoin. The second property is that Bitcoin is secure. Every Bitcoin transaction needs to be verified by a large decentralized network of computers. And this makes it impossible to counterfeit or double spend Bitcoin. And this really builds trust with the people, something that fiat currencies are really struggling with. So what do I think the future of Bitcoin holds? Well, let's go back to the early days when paper money was actually backed by gold. This system worked really well because gold had some real value due to its scarcity. But here's the thing, more gold can be mined, albeit at a higher price. But Bitcoin is truly scarce. Not more than 21 million Bitcoin will ever be created. Now, with governments printing so much money out of thin air recently, we're hearing rumors of economic collapses left and right. We're seeing a trend where governments are considering whether they should actually buy Bitcoin and hold it in their treasuries as a strategic asset. Recently, we saw the Bitcoin 2024 conference in Nashville, where we saw the US presidential candidates Trump and Kennedy announce that they are very open to holding Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, meaning that they're going to hold on to their Bitcoin and probably even buy more Bitcoin. We already saw this trend earlier with El Salvador, who's consistently buying more Bitcoin. And when one or a few of these countries basically start this trend, more will follow. And we're going to see that countries are actually going to print huge amounts of fiat currency to buy Bitcoin, to hold it as a strategic asset. Whenever this is going to happen, we're going to see trillions flow into Bitcoin's market, and we're going to see the price of Bitcoin go to heights that no one ever imagined that the price of Bitcoin could reach. And when Bitcoin becomes a strategic global asset, that's really when we're going to see a large amount of influx into the Bitcoin market. Is this a guarantee? that it will ever happen. It's not a guarantee, but we're seeing signs, and we're slowly seeing the perception of governments change from being very skeptical and anti-Bitcoin to embracing Bitcoin as a strategic tool for their own financial health. So with that being said, do you believe that the price of Bitcoin will go up forever? I think the real question that you should ask yourself is, what do you use to measure the value of Bitcoin against? So traditionally, the value of Bitcoin has been expressed in terms of fiat currencies like the dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, the pound. And whenever you are benchmarking the value of one asset against something that's becoming worth less over time, then the price of this other asset, or the value of that other asset expressed in this devaluing currency, will only go up over time. And that's due to inflation and the devaluing of money. Take the prices of houses, for example. House prices have been going up for the past decades worldwide. Is it because houses are becoming worth more, or is it because the fiat currencies that they use to express the price of these houses is becoming worth less? It's probably the latter, the second. So if you're expressing the value of Bitcoin in a currency that's depreciating over time, well, then I believe the price of Bitcoin will only go up forever. So I hope you enjoyed this perspective. I hope I was able to make you look at the price of Bitcoin from a completely different point of view, which you might have not thought about it before. Make sure that you like this video if you've gotten good value out of it. And if you want to see more valuable videos and breakdowns and tutorials from me about Bitcoin, about crypto, about how you can maximize your profits in this market, then make sure to subscribe to my channel. All right, that being said, peace out. I'll see you in the next one.